Why did you click on this video? That's a question like many others I always think about. Is it the thumbnail that made you click? Or the title? Maybe both? So many questions I often ponder, among others, like why my car always needs a repair whenever I get paid, or what happens after we die, why does asparagus make my pee smell like that, and how the fuck did the events preceding from Harambe's death inspire gooning? So many questions. Maybe a few I could answer if I got down to the bottom of it, but one question I do know the answer to. Who is the Question? The Question is probably one of the most underrated DC superheroes ever created. Like, you know Rorschach from Watchmen? Yeah, let's just say if the Question was never created, we'd have never gotten Rorschach at all, or at the very least never portrayed the same exact way. Because Rorschach's entire aesthetic is pretty much verbatim of the Question, excluding their unique masks that are so beloved. It's even crazier when reading Dennis O'Neil's Question series that there's a whole comic dedicated to the Question's acknowledgement of Rorschach through reading Watchmen to pass the time on a flight. And in the remainder of the comic, the Question imagines himself as Rorschach in his dreams. He compares himself to Rorschach when fighting crime, and even thinks for a moment about making his mask just like Rorschach's. The Question kinda glazes Rorschach a lot, but it's so well done, I just have to shout at the hilltops how much I love it and the Question as a whole. Hell, if you want a fun fact, the entire cast of Watchmen is legit based off of characters like Peacemaker, Blue Beetle, and so on. And since a couple of you guys commented for me to talk about the Question, I figured I'd take advantage of that and give you guys the answer to the question of who is the Question. No pun intended. Or was it? Now, this guy isn't like Bruce Wayne. He doesn't possess billions of dollars or gadgets. He doesn't drive an expensive sweeped-out car. He drives a beat-up buggy from the 80s. He's pretty much a regular guy like you or me, just trying to do the right thing without ever compromising, expecting nothing in return but to leave the world in a much better place than how he found it. Although Vic Sage wasn't always a good person. See, Vic Sage grew up an orphan living in a Hub City orphanage. He was an indignant kid fuming with steaming aggression, kicking and screaming, angry not at just the world, but for being abandoned by his parents. Sage had a reputation as a troublemaker that'd deal out his aggression onto others undeserving, because Vic prided himself in his defiance and his strength, which led to Sage enduring the physical abuse of the Catholic orphanage out of sheer spite. When he got old enough, Sage soon left the orphanage to college. However, higher learning did not mellow his violent tendencies, because sometime during college, he brutally beat a drug dealer for giving him LSD. After graduating from college, Sage made his mark as a highly outspoken and aggressive reporter with a reputation for obnoxiousness in Hub City. Throughout the comic, everyone can't stand Sage. They find him irritable, pretentious, and a bit of an asshole. Sage's boss quite literally hates him, but looks past it for how effective a reporter he can be at times. But through this pursuit to be one of the best reporters he could possibly be, Vic wasn't happy with his life and struggled to keep in check his violent nature. However, by showing the city that he was an incredible reporter who always got down to the bottom of every question, Vic's old college professor Aristotle Roeder came to Vic with a new conspiracy involving a new kind of artificial skin called pseudoderm that Roeder had co-developed with a Dr. R.B. Twain. The pseudoderm in question was a material akin to Plastic Man or Elongated Man's powers and was intended to work as a sort of combat bandage with the help of a bonding gas. But it had unforeseen consequences which proved to be incredibly fatal if applied to open wounds. The project was assumed to be abandoned due to this, but Twain had been selling the pseudoderm in secret despite the health risks. Vic wanted to stop him immediately but had no way of coming at him without exposing his identity. So the good old professor came in clutch and handed him a mask made of pseudoderm with the added spray to stick onto his face. The spray used to make the mask super adhesive to his face also altered the coloring on his suit and hair, concealing his identity indefinitely, donning the famous look of the Question. After which he beats the fuck out of Twain, wraps him up in pseudoderm as a hilarious joke, gets a confession out of him, and reported on his illegal activities, exposing Twain for the pathetic and repugnant man he truly was. Vic, seeing the potential of the persona of the Question being able to break the law where Vic Sage couldn't, Sage realized that he could capitalize on his endeavors as the Question by reporting them on the news. After this, Sage went through a ton of adventures as the Question, basically bumbling around and defeating actual villains through pure luck. In this, we see a Sage that's acting as the Question not out of an act for good to make the city a better place, but more so doing it as an act of catharsis and personal gain. Vic Sage in the beginning goes out as the Question for all the wrong reasons. Because when you get down to it, Vic Sage was really just an angry guy looking for a valid target to take out his anger on. However, that was until the Question teamed up with the legendary Batman, who got the chance to see just what Sage was made of, fighting against Lady Shiva along with some henchmen. Yet after nearly dying by getting shot in the head and only surviving by a 1 in a million million shot due to him wearing the mask which ended up absorbing the bullet, Batman basically says to never go back out as the Question until he is fully trained and understands what it means to be a hero, and not a moment before, in which Vic Sage goes through a sort of metamorphosis. I say this because when he finally comes to, he has complete amnesia and doesn't remember anything about his life from before. He looks at the old Vic Sage as a stranger, brushing over the things he's done in the past, the mistakes he's made, the pain he's dealt onto others who were undeserving. And looking at it all in its face value, Sage can't fathom why or how he could ever be that kind of person, automatically vowing to change as an individual seeking to redeem himself for all the pain he's caused in the past. Thus, Vic Sage took Batman's advice and sought after training from one of the greatest martial artists in the world, Richard Dragon, in which Sage spent a year learning martial arts and Eastern philosophy from Dragon. The training changed and deepened the Question's moral perspective, and the crime fighter became more understanding of the moral ambiguity of his chosen work. Vic Sage then returned to Hub City a year later and resumed his career as the Question with a new, broader worldview, and a belief that crime had to be fought on more than one level. Coming back to Hub City now rougher and tougher than ever, he'd no longer just go after petty street crime, but also the systematic corruption of Hub City at its highest levels. Because Hub City is honestly said to outrank Gotham City in terms of crime and corruption, which is actually insane when you think about it. Fighting the crime and extending to the realm of politics and social justice, he got into a lot of trouble on a day-to-day basis. Every issue, Sage is either always hurt by the end, mentally or physically, to show that he may not be the greatest or cleanest hero in the bunch, but at least he keeps getting up where others would just quit before even trying. The Question stops bus bombings conjured up by the mayor, he stops political assassinations, inspires the city to seek justice for those who have fallen from corruption, and where there is the political crime the Question deals with, there are issues that show how the Question's changed ways ripple out onto Hub City through its citizens. Some seek to challenge the Question, some feel safe because of the Question, there are some that are inspired by the Question, and then there are some who just never change. A comic I took a liking to probably the most is when Vic Sage is trying to find a serial killer who has been running amok in Hub City, strictly killing those in poor neighborhoods. While investigating leads, he keeps running into this vile, disgusting, racist cop that says and does the most abhorrent things you could ever think of. During the story, the cop takes a liking to Sage, giving him his admiration and respect, yet Vic Sage spits in the face of it and everything the monster stands for on multiple occasions. Yet Sage can never shake him off, like gum on your shoe, until there's a moment where the serial killer tries to kill Sage, that the irredeemable cop jumps in the way of the bullet and saves Sage. In that one selfless act by the most depraved, evil, ugly, disgusting person he could have ever met in his life, Sage doesn't thank the cop. He instead tries anything he can to not let him die, while demanding to know why of all people he would do something that selfless, unable to accept the reality where someone so evil could do something so heroic, hating that he was saved by someone so vile. The more and more the comic goes on and the more sus poses Vic Sage pulls off, as much good Sage has done for the city, it seems as though the bad keeps seeping out all around the city like bad weeds. Throughout the story, this fatigues Sage. In the start of his crusade, he's sharp, he's nimble, he makes a mistake here and there, but he never wavers. But then by issues 10 to 15, Sage struggles to shake off his old ways as they subconsciously start to seep back into his old life. He gets doled out, stiff, and struggles time and again to see the point in trying to save a city that so desperately doesn't want to be saved. But it's that willingness to keep going, to achieve an otherwise impossible dream, that I find the Question to be so incredibly endearing. Because later when an election is held for mayor of Hub City, people are beaten over the head by bikers, hired by the corrupt Dinsmore so he can win and plummet the city further into darkness and corruption. While the opposite Vic Sage's love interest, Myra Frere, sought to raise the city into a city of hope and prosperity. Through the course of the election, there is death and destruction everywhere. Everything you think can go wrong pretty much goes wrong. And a little bit like Rorschach, after so much time in the darkness, it almost makes the Question go insane from it all. Because you have to kind of say to yourself, how many times can you do the same thing over and over and over and expect a different result when it just never wants to happen? So much so that the Question at one point wondered if it'd really be so bad to take another person's life, and if he'd really even feel anything. Almost letting a petty thug fall to his death, feeling no need to save him because in the scenario, he couldn't quite kill him after pushing an innocent man off a 30-story building, but he also didn't have to save him after he fell over the same edge himself only seconds later. Yet in the realization that he would die because he didn't reach out to save him, the Question in a way would be inadvertently killing him, opting to save him and break a few bones instead. Though the Question did his best to contain this urge, the chaos around Hub City became worsened. He felt himself growing increasingly darker as time wore on, so in an attempt to escape the insanity of the city, he tried leaving with Myra. Myra instead chose to help the city, but let the Question take her own only daughter Jackie with him to South America, hoping that along the way he'd finally be rid of his question persona and find peace. However, this sense of serenity did not last long. Sage was quickly drawn into a drug war which ultimately forced him to kill a man to save Jackie's life. The Question's philosophy from that point changed once again, as he realized that he had no guilt over the killing and would do it again if necessary. After which, the Question really only became a side character in a bunch of other stories until his 6-issue series trying to investigate a plot to kill Superman. And somewhere along the way he developed an ability to sense a person's chi and the ability to walk into 2 different worlds for an increased awareness of his surroundings or any disturbances in a city's natural order. And after a ton of different crisis events and the development of the New 52, Vic Sage popped up to save Gotham City and made his own question symbol, which is so fucking cool, where he then retired from the mantle of the Question, passing it on to Renee Montoya 3 days later. This was because upon returning to Gotham City, the Question learned that he was suffering from lung cancer. Montoya, learning of this, had Sage hospitalized and later took it upon herself to transport him to the Himalayan city of Nanda Parbat in the hope of using its mystical properties to save him. However, she was too late. Having gone through great discomfort and hardship up until the end, Victor Sage, the Question, passed away. And then like 5 seconds later, he just becomes a Black Lantern. Now, in the present day, the Question is kind of in a realm of limbo in comics. He'll make brief cameos in several different stories, and he even had a Black Label series that was really good, but that's sadly about it. The Question to me is a character that has so much potential to have another series, and honestly, maybe even a full-length movie if done right. His awesome mask, the noir-like appearance, the dark and grittiness of Hub City followed up with villains like Lady Shiva or Richard Dragon, and trying to uncover all the systematic corruption of the city is genuinely perfect for virtually any media. And I just feel like the Question does not get the love he so rightfully deserves. The art and writing in his 36-issue series by Dennis O'Neil, Denise Cohen, and Malcolm Jones is just perfect. There are moments that I can't even begin to describe to you how much I love them for the amount of depth they carry within the context of the story. 1 or 2 that I can recount that are my favorite moments are where the Question outriddles the Riddler, for instance, where in the situation the Riddler has hostages at gunpoint on a bus on Christmas night. Essentially, he tells the hostages that they can all go free if they answer a riddle correctly. However, if they fail, they get blickied and thrown off the bus. The Question's on the bus, however, he can't really stop him physically because right before this, he suffered a cataclysmic injury to his right leg. So the Question accepts the Riddler's terms, and instead of answering the Riddler's pesky riddles, the Question makes his own for the Riddler to solve. Like, if the universe is benevolent, why is there evil? Or if the universe is evil, how can there be good? Or if we know through our senses, and our senses are imperfect, how can we really know anything? The Question spouts so many complex riddles to the point that the Riddler has to ask him to slow down because he can't possibly come to an answer on any of them. And later admits to the Question that he spouts riddles anyone can solve to distract himself from the difficult ones he can't solve himself that'll drive him crazy. And in the end, when the Question stops the Riddler and can't quite figure out what to do with him, the Riddler asks to be let go because it's Christmas. So the Question looks at him and goes, maybe we should play by your rules. Maybe I should ask you a riddle. If you answer correctly, you go free. And the Riddler thinks to himself that it's going to be a piece of cake, and the story just ends there. But what I like to think happened at the end is that the Riddler failed and just got pummeled for killing innocent people trying to get home to see their families on Christmas night. And for my other favorite moment, it has to come from issue 27, which acts as a sort of meta comic that expresses how important comics are and have always been. Rotor is basically unpacking his old Captain Stars and Sergeant Stripes comics from the early 40s, because a cousin of his that made the comic is coming down to Hub City to visit for a bit. Sage kind of laughs at his comics and shits on them for being junk literature because they aren't to his reading standards. And throughout the issue, the cousin's comic is sprinkled in, reflecting the plot of the story going on in Vic Sage's life, where Myra had been shot twice after being elected mayor, ending up in a coma for months, sending Hub City into chaos like never before. Sage begins crumbling under the pressure, seeing no hope in sight for the city, or if Myra will ever wake up from the coma. And during Rotor's cousin's visit, Rotor asks his cousin how life has been since 1946, to which his cousin goes, "About a year after I won the war," to which Rotor cuts him off and says, "I beg your pardon?" To which he says with a straight face, "World War II. I won it. You're looking at me like I'm insane." He goes on to explain to Rotor that after the war he ended up in the Congo, where he fell in with a tribe of pygmies and apprenticed their shaman Medicine Man, in which he learned that he won the war. He further explains this by saying that he learned of a hunting ritual where the day before the hunt, the shaman would draw the prey hunted and killed through several pages. Every time, every single time, The way it'd be drawn was how it'd ultimately turn out. Rhoda then says, okay, but what does that have to do with the war? To which his cousin says that because of thousands of comic artists and cartoonists that were depicting Americans winning the war, it was the manifestation of those events that led to their victory, adding that because the Nazis didn't have comics was why they had lost. It was the unconscious faith that he had put into his work among thousands of others that unknowingly led to the winning of World War II. Eventually, Sage meets Rhoda's cousin, who explains the same theory, and Sage, desperate to find any way to save Myra and somehow establish order to Hub City again, asks the cousin to draw the same exact page from his comic, but to replace the woman in the comic with Myra, because Sage is just so exhausted. He's out of his mind with fatigue, because the city is going to hell. Innocent people are dying. Myra's in a coma. They just desperately need a miracle, exclaiming that there isn't anything to lose by just manifesting something good to happen. So the cousin draws the page, hands it to Sage, and says this page is worth more than they could ever know, because hundreds of comic books were needed to win a war, but maybe just a single page will be enough for Hub City. Sage takes the page to the top of the hospital and prays to the image, praying for a miracle, and just a few floors below, a nurse and a doctor prepare to administer a shot of adrenaline into Myra's bloodstream, which snaps her out of her coma, exactly like the comic page. A miracle come true, all because of the power of an idea, a thought, a prayer, a hope that things can be better. I don't know what it is, and it's hard to put in words exactly how I feel about the question, but he's a character I've always found very fascinating, and a ton of you guys requested me to talk about him for a bit, so I'm really happy that I had the opportunity to talk about him. And I guess all I have to say now is, that's the answer to your question. I hope you guys like this video, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and as always, I'll catch y'all on the flip side.